Here is every time Tywin Lannister outsmarted his enemies in Game of Thrones and the books. Tywin Lannister never raised his voice. He never needed to. In a world where kings screamed and generals raged and lords slammed their fists on tables to make people listen, Tywin sat completely still and made everyone in the room feel like they were already losing. He was the most dangerous kind of intelligent, the kind that never lets you see it working. Starting with destroying House Rain. Before the show even begins, before the Red Wedding, before the War of Five Kings, before any of it, Tywin Lannister had already pulled off the defining move of his entire life. And most show viewers only know it as a song. When Tywin's father Tytos Lannister ruled over Castle Rock, House Lannister was a joke. Titus was a weak and generous man who lent money he never collected and laughed along when lords mocked him behind his back, and sometimes to his face. The Westerlands were slipping. The Lannister name, which should have been the most feared in the Seven Kingdoms, had become something people whispered about with contempt rather than dread.
The king is tired. See him to his chambers.
Come along.
House Rain of Castamere decided to test how far that weakness went. Lord Roger Rain was powerful, ambitious, and had since convinced himself that the Lannister name no longer meant anything. Tywin was barely a grown man when he marched on Castamere. He didn't negotiate. He didn't offer terms that could be refused and renegotiated. He surrounded Castamere, flooded the mines where the Rains had taken shelter, and drowned every last one of them. The entire house erased. And then, because Tywin understood something that most rulers never grasp, he commissioned a song about it. The Rains of Castamere became the musical reminder that played at every feast, every wedding, every gathering across Westeros for the next 40 years. Every time a lord heard those opening notes, he remembered what happened to the last family that thought the Lannisters were soft. He turned that war into a permanent psychological weapon that kept working long after the bodies had rotted. In the books, this moment is described in even more chilling detail. Tywin was 19 years old. He moved with a speed and totality that shocked even experienced commanders. He left nothing behind, not out of cruelty for its own sake, but because he understood that half measures send half messages. The Rains needed to not exist, and so they ceased to exist. That is the foundation everything else in his story is built on. Outmaneuvering Robb Stark militarily when Robb Stark rode south. Tywin Lannister was the one man in Westeros who took him seriously from the beginning. Every other Lannister, including Cersei, underestimated the boy king from the north. Tywin did not make that mistake. Robb's strategy was sound on the surface. He split his forces, sending a decoy host under Roose Bolton toward the King's Road, while he took his real army west to attack Jaime Lannister to seize Riverrun. The move worked. Robb Stark captured Jaime Lannister and humiliated the Lannister army at Werviest at Whispering Wood. Tywin's response was not panic, it was repositioning. He pulled his forces out of the Riverlands, refusing to fight Robb on ground where Robb held the advantage, and marched to Harrenhal. This is a move that frustrated everyone around him, including his own commanders. Tywin understood something they did not. Harrenhal was the strategic center of the continent. Holding it gave him access to every road in the south. Tywin was waiting for Robb Stark to make a mistake that ambition and youth always eventually produce. And Robb eventually made every mistake Tywin could have hoped for. In the books, this is even more explicit. Tywin openly tells his commanders that Robb Stark is dangerous precisely because he is good. He respects the threat in a way that Cersei and Joffrey never could. That respect is what allows him to plan around it rather than react to it emotionally. He is not trying to beat Robb on a battlefield. He is trying to outlast him politically, and that is a completely different and far more patient game.
No one will stay here. Sir Gregor will head out with 500 riders and set a riverland on fire from God's Eye to the Red Fork. The rest of us will regroup at Harrenhal.
His interrogation and intimidation of Arya at Harrenhal. This is one of the most quietly extraordinary sequences in the entire show, and it works because of what is not being said. Arya Stark is captured and brought to Harrenhal as a servant. She ends up assigned to Tywin Lannister personally as his cupbearer, and Tywin almost immediately realizes she is not what she claims to be. He notices she speaks too well for a commoner. She holds eye contact too long. She has none of the nervous deference that a genuine lowborn servant servant would show to the most powerful man in Westeros. He asks her where she is from, catches her in small inconsistencies, and watches her correct herself in real time. And then he does something that reveals everything about how his mind works. He keeps her close, he talks to her, he lets her pour his wine and stand behind his chair during war councils where highly sensitive strategic information is being discussed openly. Now think about that for a moment. Tywin Lannister, the most paranoid and careful strategic mind in the Seven Kingdoms, is willingly discussing military plans in front of a girl he suspects is lying about who she is. There are two possible explanations. Either he is testing her to see what she does with the information, or he genuinely enjoys talking to someone intelligent enough to keep up with him, possibly both. His own children frustrated him. Joffrey was an idiot. Cersei thought she was the smartest. Jaime wasted his potential, his mind, and his sword. And here was this sharp, furious, contained little girl who looked him in the eye and gave as much as she got. He tells her that most men would rather deny a hard truth than face it. She agrees. He notices. He says she reminds him of his daughter and does not mean it as a compliment exactly, but there is something in it that is closer to respect than anything he offers most people.
You're a sharp little thing, aren't you?
He never figures out she is Arya Stark. The way he handles the entire situation, using her proximity rather than eliminating an unknown variable, shows a mind that is always calculating multiple angles simultaneously. In the books, Arya's time at Harrenhal is longer and more complex, with deeper exposure to Lannister military operations. The strategic information she overhears shapes events significantly later in the story. The show compressed this, but preserved the essential dynamic between them, which is one of the best relationships in the series. Sending Tyrion as Hand of the King, when Tywin learns that Joffrey has executed Ned Stark against explicit advice, that Cersei has completely lost control of the capital, and that the entire Lannister position in King's Landing is deteriorating. He makes a decision that most lords would never have the coldness to make. He sends the son he despises to fix the mess the son he cannot control has created. Appointing Tyrion as Hand of the King is a masterpiece of pragmatic thinking. Tywin does not like Tyrion. He has made this clear his entire life, but he is not governed by what he likes. He is governed by what works. And Tyrion, whatever Tywin's personal feelings about him, has the sharpest political mind of any of his children. Sending him to King's Landing is the equivalent of deploying your best tool for a specific job, regardless of how you feel about the tool.
Why not anyone? Why me?
You're my son.
Tyrion arrives and immediately begins dismantling the disasters Cersei has created. He removes Janos Slynt, who is dangerous and corruptible. He plants false information with 3 different council members simultaneously to find the leak, feeding Cersei intelligence about his plans. He manages the wildfire preparation for Blackwater. He negotiates with the hill tribes. He does, in short, exactly what Tywin sent him to do. And then Tywin arrives at the Battle of the Blackwater, takes credit for the victory, and removes Tyrion from the position the moment the immediate crisis is resolved. This is also a Tywin move. He gave Tyrion just enough authority to solve the problem, then reasserted control the moment the problem was solved. He never intended it to be permanent. Tyrion was a precision instrument deployed for a specific purpose, not a successor being groomed for leadership. The efficiency of it is almost brutal. In the books, Tyrion's tenure as Hand is even more impressive, and his removal even more pointed. Tywin arrives and immediately sidelines Tyrion and begins operating as though Tyrion's months of work were simply maintenance performed by staff rather than genuine leadership. Tyrion is furious. Tywin is unmoved. He is already thinking about the next problem. Negotiating with Littlefinger and Varys. Tywin's relationship with the 2 greatest information brokers in Westeros is fascinating because he does not trust either of them and makes absolutely no effort to pretend otherwise. When Littlefinger comes to him with the proposal to broker an alliance with the Tyrells following the disaster at Blackwater, Tywin listens, evaluates, and uses the proposal without for a single moment treating Baelish as a partner or an equal. He extracts what is useful, the Tyrell alliance, and gives Littlefinger the Lord Paramountcy of the Riverlands as payment, a title with significant symbolic weight, but which Tywin knows Baelish will struggle to actually consolidate given the ongoing chaos there. He paid Littlefinger in prestige and difficulty rather than in real power. That is a Tywin Lannister transaction. With Varys, the dynamic is different. Tywin knows that Varys serves the realm as an abstraction rather than any particular house, which makes him useful but fundamentally unreliable. Uses Varys' intelligence network without pretending the relationship is anything other than transactional. He never gives Varys information he does not want spread, and he never mistakes Varys' apparent cooperation for actual loyalty. In the books, Tywin's handling of the small council is more comprehensively documented. He runs those meetings the way he runs a military campaign, with clear objectives, assigned responsibilities, and zero tolerance for the political theater that Cersei and Joffrey had allowed to consume council sessions. Lords who came prepared were heard. Lords who came without preparation were not invited back. The council under Tywin functioned. Under everyone else it performed, manipulating Joffrey from behind the throne. Joffrey Baratheon was the single greatest liability the Lannister family possessed, and managing him was perhaps Tywin's most thankless and difficult ongoing task. Joffrey was cruel in the undisciplined, unfocused way that genuinely dangerous people never are. He hurt people because he enjoyed it, not because it served a purpose. He executed Ned Stark, and keeping Ned Stark as a hostage was the strategically correct move. He treated the small council like servants and his own grandfather like an irritant. Tywin's approach to Joffrey was one of the few situations where his usual methods had limited effectiveness. You cannot intimidate someone who does not understand the source of the threat. Joffrey was too stupid and too arrogant to be afraid of his grandfather in any productive way. So Tywin shifted tactics. He humiliated Joffrey publicly and deliberately, most famously by dismissing him from the small council meeting and telling him that any king who must declare himself worthy of respect is not truly respected. He forced Joffrey to back down from confrontations where Joffrey had already committed to a position, which is one of the most painful things you can do to an ego that fragile.
I am the king! I will punish you.
Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king.
He was not turning Joffrey into a good king. He had given up on that. He was containing the damage, managing the instability, and ensuring that Joffrey's worst impulses collided with enough friction to slow them down. So it was crisis management dressed up as mentorship. In the books, Tywin's private assessment of Joffrey is even colder. He is aware that Joffrey is not fit to rule and makes no romantic pretense about it. His entire strategy with the small council is designed to root real decisions around Joffrey rather than through him. The king signs, the king attends. The king does not decide. The purple wedding aftermath. When Joffrey dies at his own wedding feast, political situation in King's Landing becomes immediately catastrophic. The king is dead. Tyrion is arrested on the spot. The Tyrell alliance, which the Lannisters desperately need, is now complicated by the fact that their new allies just watched the king die at a wedding they largely organized. Chaos is threatening to consume everything. Tywin's response is a clinic in crisis management. Within what feels like hours, he has restructured the succession, placing the younger and far more manageable Tommen on the throne. He has begun working to preserve the Tyrell alliance by ensuring the marriage between Margaery and Tommen to becoming queen continues uninterrupted. He is managing Cersei's grief and rage while simultaneously preventing her worst impulses from dictating policy. He is overseeing Tyrion's trial, which he intends to use to resolve the Tyrion problem he has never been comfortable with, while maintaining the appearance of Lannister judicial fairness. He does all of this while appearing composed, not unaffected, but composed. There is a scene where he is clearly aware that Joffrey's death, while a crisis, has also removed a liability. He does not say this. He would never say this, but the efficiency with which he pivots to managing Tommen, who is gentle and teachable and everything Joffrey was not, suggests that Tywin had already thought about what a post-Joffrey Lannister position would look like. In the books, the political maneuvering following Joffrey's death is even more intricate. Tywin moves simultaneously on multiple fronts: judicial, diplomatic and succession-related, with a speed that suggests he had contingency plans already drafted. Whether he expected Joffrey to die at that specific moment is left deliberately ambiguous. What is not ambiguous is that he knew how to survive it. The Red Wedding. This is the one. This is the move that defines Tywin Lannister more completely than anything else he ever did, because it required him to do something that his pride made genuinely difficult. It required him to ask for help. Robb Stark had defeated the Lannisters on every battlefield they had contested. Tywin could not beat him in open combat. A straight military resolution was not available, so Tywin changed the nature of the conflict entirely. He opened negotiations with Walder Frey, the Lord of the Twins, a man who had been nursing a grudge against the Starks since Robb broke his betrothal promise, and who was simultaneously terrified of backing the losing side. Tywin offered him something Frey had wanted his entire life, which was legitimacy and a place at the winning table. He brought Roose Bolton into the arrangement, a man who had his own reasons for wanting Robb Stark gone and who had been playing both sides carefully enough to survive whatever outcome emerged. The actual mechanics of the Red Wedding were executed by Frey and Bolton. Tywin's contribution was the architecture. He identified the right people, understood what each of them needed, made offers that addressed those specific needs, and bound the arrangement together in a way that gave everyone involved a reason to follow through. He then waited. When the news reached King's Landing that Robb Stark was dead, Joffrey wanted to send Robb's head to Sansa. Tywin shut it down immediately because Tywin understood that the Red Wedding was already going to be controversial. The laws of guest right, one of the most sacred traditions in Westerosi culture, had been violated. There would be consequences for that. Adding gratuitous cruelty on top of it was pointless provocation. The enemy was already dead. Rubbing Sansa's face in it gained nothing and created unnecessary resentment. Joffrey could not see that distinction. Tywin saw nothing else. In the books, the Red Wedding planning is shown to have been even more coldly calculated. Tywin's letters to Frey and Bolton are referenced, and the coordination involved suggests months of careful groundwork laid while the war was still actively being fought. He was planning the peace before he had finished losing the battles. That is what separates a strategist from a commander. A commander wins fights. A strategist ends wars. In his letter after the Red Wedding, Tywin writes to various lords explaining the outcome as justice rather than murder. He frames it legally, politically, and historically. He's already writing the first draft of how this event will be remembered. He understood that controlling the narrative of a controversial act was as important as the act itself. And then there is the moment that ends everything. Tyrion escapes from his cell the night before his execution, helped by Jaime and Varys. But before he leaves, he climbs the hidden passage to Tywin's chambers. He finds Shae in his father's bed. He kills her, and then he finds Tywin on the privy and puts a crossbow bolt in him. Tywin Lannister, the man who planned the Red Wedding and destroyed House Rain and outmaneuvered every significant political player in Westeros for 40 years, died on a toilet, shot by the son he spent his life refusing to value.
You're no son of mine. I am your son. I have always been your son.
He said the word that Tyrion could never forgive him for, and Tyrion pulled the trigger. This is the most important thing about Tywin Lannister's death. It was not a military failure. It was not a political miscalculation. It was not someone outthinking him on a strategic level. It was a personal failure. His contempt for Tyrion, which was emotional rather than rational, was the one vulnerability in an otherwise almost impenetrable mind. Every enemy he had ever faced came at him where he was strong. The one person who could destroy him came at him where he was human. The man who said a lion does not concern himself with the opinions of sheep was killed because he could not stop caring what one particular person thought of him long enough to treat that person with the basic decency that might have saved his life. In the books, Tywin's final scene carries the same devastating weight. Tyrion shoots him twice. Tywin calls Shae a whore with his last breath, confirming everything, and Tyrion fires the second bolt. The man who built a dynasty, who reshaped the power structure of an entire continent through patience and intelligence and ruthlessness, ends in the most undignified way possible because he never learned that contempt is not a strategy. It is a weakness wearing a strong man's face. So let us know in the comments what you think was Tywin's smartest move. And if you want another breakdown in the world of Game of Thrones, check out our video on the 7 levels of intelligence in Game of Thrones characters. Thanks for watching and have a good one.